He's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's Michael Shure, everybody. Yeah. Smash that like button for Michael Shure.
With your iron rod.
Hit that thumbs up for Michael Shure.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Okay, we heard it the first time. All right, now, Michael, this was was this a surprise announcement? I know maybe not from the standpoint of her politics was it a surprise announcement, but an official declaration?
Look, I think when Democrats were talking about how important winning the runoff in Georgia was, it was precisely because of something like this, whether it was Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema made the most sense because Joe Manchin is a different case. We'll talk about him in a second, but Sinema is someone who is definitely going to be primaried in 2024 from the left and from another Democrat. It is a state that has a higher Republican registration than Democratic registration. So the thinking would be that if she runs as an independent, she could do kind of what Joe Lieberman did, pull a certain number of Democrats and then even get Republican support. And that's her path to winning a second term if she so desires. So there was a lot more impetus there. And she's, like people say, well, will she caucus with the Democrats? Kyrsten Sinema didn't go to a lot of those caucus lunches anyway. She was not somebody who, when I was on the Hill with more regularity than I am now, that you saw going to those caucus lunches and the caucus meetings. So she was always a bit of an outlier. It does raise questions about what happens, what the dynamic is, how much of a wild card she is. But 5149 is still the most important number. It's important for committees. It's important for subpoenas. This doesn't seem to change that.
I didn't realize that she was an embattled figure. Is she? In other words, in her home state, is she? That you seem to be suggesting she wants to shore things up politically, if you'll pardon the expression, shore up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's spelled
not sure up, but right. Shore up. Yes. Okay.
I really think that she is. I mean, she's look. Ruben Gallego has made no secret. He hasn't said he's running, but he's made no secret of both his interest in going farther with a progressive agenda and his distaste with what Kyrsten Sinema was doing last year. But she's still been someone who the Democrats ran in 2018. She won that race, and she is going to go forward still as the favorite until something else happens. But Democrats aren't crazy about her. Already, the Democratic Party in Arizona has said that, listen, we're moving on. She left us and we're leaving her and we're on to the next thing. It's going to be an interesting race, that race in 2024.
Well, it becomes not that big of a deal, right? I mean, if Raphael Warnock had not won, we'd all be up in arms. But now it's like,
Right. And look, I mean, even still, we'd be more scared of Joe Manchin. If she is continuing to hold her committee assignments, which she said she's going to do, she told that, I believe, to the White House as well as Leader Schumer's office. So I think then it's sort of status quo. She's going to be a thorn in the side of Democrats, as she has been, a thorn in the side of the Republican agenda, which she was never embracing. It was more what she tried to do, and successfully to some degree, to President Biden's agenda. So, yeah, I think you're right, Kim, but I also don't know that this changes anything. Now, if this were to have happened, if Herschel Walker was in the Senate, and it would make people like Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema change parties, because that would change control and that would put them in the majority, and do something, own the libs a little bit, then that might be the case. I don't see it changing anything though right now.
I don't mean to move on, but given what you've just said and given our time that we have with you being limited, I want to ask you about something that I find so infuriating. Certain things just make your blood boil, and the Pentagon budget is the thing that hits me, among others. And the U.S. House just backed legislation paving the way for the Defense Department to hit a record $858 billion next year, $45 billion more, and you will see this a lot, $45 billion more than proposed by President Joe Biden. So you already have a bloated Pentagon budget, you have a request, and then, of course, Congress says, no, we want to give you even more money. This is an 8% increase in this case. I wonder if you could speak to that and the politics of it, because it's underhanded politics in a way.
or it's the most obvious and
Okay.
representative politics that exists. I mean, the military is a big consumer of something that goes on in all 435 districts in one way or another. And so you have members of Congress who are representing former military. They're representing the big lobby that the military contractors have. They're representing the banks that provide the loans to veterans. It just goes on and on. There is no pork politics like military pork politics. And that's what they do with these military budgets. The reason it's so bloated is because it is bringing the bacon home to 435 districts. Each one of them has some sort of military component. You say, well, they all have teachers. Why don't they do the same for teachers? Well, that's where the cynicism can rise, because you know what the military lobby and the military contracting lobby is. You know what the shipbuilders do. You know what the manufacturers do. You know what the health services people do. And those are powerful lobbies. And that's why everybody votes for these things. And that's why the Pentagon budget keeps going up and up and up.
There's a little less than 5% in there for troop salaries.
Yeah, they got a 4.6% raise for the military. That seems to be a standard raise in every NDA, and anytime they authorize a new budget having to do with the military. So, yeah, look, and veterans aren't even looked after by the military budget. They're a totally different budget. So it's it's a curious thing. It's not something that's going to change, and the people that are upset about it are going to have to fight their battles elsewhere, because these things, they've tried to trim Pentagon budgets for a long time. It just never, in the U.S. House, it never makes any political sense for anyone to vote against it.
Debbie says, okay, but the money going to the Pentagon, couldn't that also be money to replenish what we've sent to Ukraine? I just don't see it working that way. In fact, a lot of the arms money, and again, Michael is the guy I really want to hear from, but a lot of that the arms we're shipping, I mean, that's just money and arms shipped right to Ukraine. I don't think they replenish those stocks per se.
No, they don't. And that's part of, it's a little bit untethered to this. It's why they've tried to make these, these Pentagon bills. Sorry, guys, dogs.
No,
it's at the door.
Mailmen come, and that's what happens.
It's all right.
Then mailmen leave. It's why the Ukraine stuff is untethered from anything having to do with a Pentagon budget, really, and they try and keep that as separate as they're able to do.
In our last couple of minutes, the Congress did rally behind this Defense of Marriage Act, and so that seemed to have this sort of interesting bipartisan support. I say interesting because, the Holy Rollers, really on the GOP side, some of them came over. The Holy Rollers didn't. In fact, there was this impassioned, ridiculous, theatrical speech by one House member where she's in tears talking about, how marriage is being ruined, the institution, like it's some, divine institution.
Right. From Missouri. Yeah.
Oh my God. It was like bad dinner theater. Anyways, speak to this and what it actually does, if you would, please, Michael.
Well, I mean, what it does is, and this can be put at the feet of Clarence Thomas, because when he hinted after the Dobbs decision on abortion that gay rights and gay marriage could be next, it mobilized Congress and mobilized the leadership in Congress to say, we can't let that happen. We're going to codify this at the federal level so that the court can't mess with it, and the court won't. And now it's great defense of something that had taken a while to get to for Congress, which from the days of Don't Ask, Don't Tell to the Defense of Marriage, all the way up to having it at the Supreme Court. The Congress wanted to make sure, and Nancy Pelosi specifically wanted to make sure that before she left Congress, this was done, and it didn't take very much doing. I mean, there's always going to be, like you call them, Mark, the Holy Rollers, and the Holy Rollers there are losing their battles, as they usually do. And when you're talking about civil rights progress, it always takes a little while. Actually, gay rights took a lot less time in a truncated way than some of the others. But when you get to progress, it always goes in that direction. That was one thing that King got right, is the bending toward justice. It just has to keep bending. And that's, without getting sort of hokey about it, that's what this was. This was the next step in that. And it was one that was an exclamation point on the speaker's career.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, first of all, truncated is a ding word. But I am always hesitant. I wish.
What's your skepticism? There are always going to be people who vote against.
No. I was just going to make a general point, and this reflects my cynicism and downcast attitude toward humanity, perhaps, and our system. But even as they have built those reinforcements around the gay community's ability to marry and have those marriages respected state to state, you see them undo women's reproductive freedoms at the Supreme Court level. And I see the Supreme Court so radicalized now by the right that I see, sadly, that the, bending toward justice doesn't necessarily, in my lifetime, I don't see it happening.
Right. Well, you're right. But if you take that in the context of other civil rights efforts, right? I mean, there's always people that are pushing back on it. Brown versus Board of Education had all deliberate speed, which was this vague amount of time in which they had to integrate the schools. You look at what happened with Dobbs, and what did it do? It made people realize, it woke people up to the fact, not only voters who reelected a Democratic Senate and gave the Republicans a lot less of a House victory than they thought they would have, based on the Dobbs decision alone, I would say. But it also motivated people in Congress to say, wait a second, if they can do this with Roe, look what they could do with Obergefell. And so now they've done this in Congress to fight against that. So I understand the pessimism about it, and it would be great if it was always like that. But they're always going to be people pushing against it, usually from the religious right.
Well, and to maybe make the point or add to your point, the midterm elections did actually turn out to be a reaction in part to what this activist Supreme Court, radicalized, as I call them, Supreme Court did. They may have just overstepped, and all of a sudden it was like to use the oft-used term, a wake-up call to so many that, hey guys, if there's more of this in the wings, if you vote more GOP leadership in.
Right, and you didn't need elected members of Congress to tell you that. You had a Supreme Court justice tease it after the Dobbs.
That's right.
And so I think Clarence Thomas did a huge favor to the left by being an idiot and leaking that intent, because it really started the fire in Congress to have the vote that they had yesterday.
You can find him here regularly on Fridays. Michael Shure, you can see him over on TYT and across the spectrum. He's a regular political analyst in so many different places. I so appreciate you spending time with us, Michael. Yeah, really cool. You can follow him on Twitter for now at Michael Shure, Shure. Michael Shure, everyone. Thanks, Michael Shure.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.